Man back here with Open. Darren Jaime here with you. We want to tell you that the New York Dream Act failed in the Senate by 2 votes. 30 to 29, actually. If enacted, the DREAM Act would have allowed all of New York's children to apply for financial aid for college, regardless of their immigration status. We're continuing our conversation with Assemblyman Marcus Crespo, and we're also joined by Assemblyman Francisco Moya, the Assemblyman of the District 39, and thank you so much for sharing with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let me start with you, because I've already talked to him for a few seconds.
Sure.
When the DREAM Act passed out of Albany, out of the Assembly, thoughts were, hey, things are going to go well. You get to the place where it fails in the Senate, and to the surprise of a lot of people, your thoughts on what this means with the failure of the passage?
Well, I think it just shows that we still have a lot of work to do in the New York State Senate. It is controlled by the Republican Party. We see that the Democrats don't have a majority yet. We know that if the Democrats were in control, it wouldn't have been such a hard lift for us to get the DREAM Act passed in the state of New York and through the state Senate. But I think that we continue. The fight's not over. We really now have to look at how we're going to ensure that we can get 2 votes in the Senate. We really have our marching orders now and know where to go to make sure that we can get members to vote for this important piece of legislation that would change the lives of many undocumented students.
Now, out of the 29, 1 Democrat voted no, and so were you surprised by that?
Very surprised. We think that our allies are Democrats. We understand that there is a different nature of voting sometimes in upstate New York, but the Democratic core value is always been about helping people advance in different areas, in particular education. This is a state that really relishes the good fight that immigrants put up to succeed in the state of New York and in this country. And I think that when we're faced with tough challenges, it's always the opportunity for people to step up and do the right thing as opposed to political expedience.
Senator Assemblyman Crespo, tell me a little bit about this. For New Yorkers, what do you feel with the failure of the DREAM Act passing? What does that mean for people in New York?
As Francisco said, I really think that it's about educating and continuing to mobilize support. We have some work to do in that area. There's still people who have misconceptions about what the DREAM Act really does. And simply put, we have students that we're making an investment as a state, providing them a K through 12 education. These are the children of immigrant families most of whom have found themselves here with no fault of their own, no decision of their own, and know no other country or culture than ours. They pledge allegiance to our flag. They grow up with our citizen children, and they graduate with them. But at that high school graduation, and in some cases in my own district, I've seen valedictorians who have been undocumented students, and then they are told, while your peers are going to get the assistance they need to continue their academic education, you will not. And that, to me, just sounds unfair. On the moral issue of helping immigrants, that's what this country's been about. That's what the Statue of Liberty still reflects. That's what, we all use that as a punchline. We are the children of immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants. Well, we have to believe that then and help immigrants in this generation as well. On the economic side of the issue, it's a small investment in terms of the amount of money that it would cost, but it is a tremendous investment in making sure that we continue to progress as a state, that we have the workforce of tomorrow that we need, that we tap into the intellectual capacity of these children, and that we allow them an opportunity to continue to grow. In the state of New York, the job growth that has happened, the business growth that has happened because of immigrant businesses. And so we have to be realistic about what we're saying. We're not taking anything away from any other student. This is an entitlement program. It means that as many students qualify for it, they're supposed to get the assistance, and this would just expand that as well to those students that graduate from our schools, that speak our language, that pledge allegiance to our flag, and that want an opportunity to go to college.
Assemblyman Moya, so close, and there are a lot of circumstances that really could have got this thing passed through.
Sure. Well, look, I think that in the Assembly, we've been doing this for the last 3 years. We've passed it 3 years in a row, and we've included it in our one-house budget. We've always seen that the obstacle has been the Senate. We have now really also engaged in conversations with Governor Cuomo to ask him to come out and support the New York State DREAM Act. We know what his leadership would mean. We've seen when he gets behind an issue what happens, such as marriage equality, minimum wage. These are issues that he's really lent his support and his full support on, and has been able to help that translate into passage in the legislature. That's what we continue to seek. We will continue to grow our support. We've seen that in the last 3 years we took an issue that no one really wanted to talk about, and now we're knocking on the door of victory here. But it all comes down to ensuring that the leadership in Albany is doing the right thing by all New Yorkers, regardless of your immigration status.
When a bill like this fails, what happens from now on? I mean, what's the process now? It fails, and then we'll go.
We keep at it. I mean, now we have a framework to know who we have to work, who we have to convince, what districts we have to, educate, and we'll continue to work on it.
And look, session's not over. We have till the end of June. The fact that it wasn't included in the budget is beyond disappointing, but we still have a roadmap, and that roadmap is ensuring that we can try to get it back to the floor of the New York State Senate this year, and make sure that we can get enough votes to get it passed this session.
You got one guy up in Rochester, right my way, who seems to have held out on the Democratic side. Are you optimistic that you might be able to convince him?
Well, we're going to be visiting Rochester and other areas throughout the state to talk to the folks, because this is not just a Latino issue. This is an issue that affects all communities. And we're going to go up there and we're going to deliver our message and talk about the history of New York and what we've done as immigrants, and to tell them that this is the right thing to do. This is the moral thing to do. This is the New York thing to do. And that's, I think, what our message is going to be to the people in his district, and hopefully that we can see victory on the horizon.
What do you see things happening from here? Because obviously some conversations have to be made, and you're doing the part as far as elected officials. But what about community support? What can the community do to really be galvanized to support this and really get the message out that this really needs to go forward?
Well, I think it's a matter of calling your local representatives and telling them that you want the New York State DREAM Act passed. It's calling Dean Skelos. It's calling Governor Cuomo. It's getting involved in an issue that would take you about 5 minutes to pick up the phone and call and say that you support the New York State DREAM Act and want to see its passage.
I hear people say it all the time. Just call. If somebody says, what difference does that make? You say what to somebody says, if I just put a call in, 5 minutes, make my call, what difference does that make?
It makes a world of difference. It makes a world of difference for the governor to know that New Yorkers across the state support this, that they see it as a priority. It makes a world of difference for local elected officials to know that their communities are paying attention to this issue, that they can't just dismiss it as somebody else's problem. It makes a difference in terms of giving the community something to fight for. Earlier we talked about the incredulousness that people, or the perceptions people have of government. Well, we need an engaged citizenry. If people don't vote, if people don't come out, if people don't speak out, then change will not come. And so we need people to be active as they once were. And we saw what happened in the activism of the 60s and the 70s and the change that brought about. We need to bring that back. And I think this is the kind of issue that makes people feel like I have to do my part. I have to do the right thing. Like as Francisco said, this is a New York thing to do. We should make that happen. And I think we need everybody's help to just make that call, tweet it out, Facebook it, whatever, but really become an advocate as well and say that their peers, their fellow students deserve the help. And we, particularly the young generation, needs to speak out and make their presence felt.
I was going to ask, that was where I was leading into, talk about the young population and the young generation. Is there a grassroots movement to really get them engaged?
Well, they've been very engaged. I mean, I think the Dreamers have been the really driving force and the face of this campaign. We've seen colleges really come together and march in Washington, march in Albany, protest different elected officials' offices to get the attention and start mobilizing, which is the most important thing to do. Just going back to what it means to an elected official to get one phone call, we take that very serious. it's an election year. And this is the moment when people can really get the attention of their state legislator by making those phone calls. We see that when there is an issue, we'll get flooded with emails and phone calls on a host of issues throughout the budget cycle. Now is the time for our folks in our communities, in immigrant communities, and throughout the state to really get engaged on an issue that is only going to make New York a better place for all of us. It is about educating young New Yorkers. It's about the opportunities that will be created. The fact that if we don't educate these young dreamers now, we will be paying for this down the road. We have an opportunity to educate these young students, or we will have a generation that will not be educated and that we will be paying for through public assistance down the road. These kids, all they're asking for is that one opportunity. They're not saying we want a special handout. They're not saying we want special treatment. They're saying give us the opportunity to compete, and we will be able to demonstrate that by getting a good quality education and being productive New Yorkers in the future.
And so certainly people can play a part in that by giving a call to their local official, I guess, and the local elected official, letting them know exactly that you're in favor of the DREAM Act and putting your voice out and letting your voice be heard. And so, Assemblyman Moya, when you look at this and you look at the fact that you've got this groundswell support on the Assembly and then the Senate level, the opportunity to sway the governor, because on some senses we get a consensus that he is in favor of it. Then on other senses, looks like there is no real push or real affirmation, if you will. What's it going to take, do you think, to really get the governor going on full steam behind this in the way that you said those other categories have really got his attention?
Well, I think the governor has been engaged now, given the momentum of the DREAM Act, and I think that that's a positive thing. We've always asked and looked for the governor's leadership on this issue, and I think that we've gotten to the point where the governor is listening and looking to do the right thing on the DREAM Act, and we hope to continue to have his support going forward.
So we want to tell you that you can check out Assemblyman Moya, you can check out Assemblyman Crespo and get to their respective offices, show your support for the DREAM Act there, and then at the same time go a little bit further and send it up the food chain, if you will, and be able to get that support. Assemblyman Crespo, I'll let you get the last word in all this.
I just want to thank you for this opportunity to make sure that Bronxites know that we're working hard to deliver on issues throughout the budget in every aspect, and we're working hard on important legislation, and then issues like this that bring many communities together. And so we really want to thank Bronxites for the opportunity to educate your viewers about this issue.
No problem. Assemblyman Crespo,
thank you.
Good to have you.
Thank you so much.
All righty. We want you to stay with us here on Open. We will continue it up.